Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the best place for the best takes. I'm Benjamin Cure. This is the Benjamin Cure Show. What a day of football. Not even weekend. This Monday morning has been jam-packed with different headlines, rumors. Of course, the biggest being Derek Carr. He has picked his destination, and boy, oh boy, is the contract so sweet. I'm going to get into that in a little bit, but first, there is so much news coming out right now because we are in the midst of, the offseason in the NFL, and there's going to be a lot of teams making moves to get under the cap, to solidify their playoff runs. And right now, as I'm coming on the air, 1 minute ago, 2 minutes ago, Tony Pollard apparently has been franchise tagged by the Cowboys, so that shows you what approach they're going to be taking on that front. I'm reading that Derek Carr is apparently being shopped by the Titans. He could be on the move. Who knows where? I wonder if a playoff contender will give a boatload of picks to get him on their team to become the Super Bowl favorite, or if he will go to a team that is just lacking any sort of star talent, which would be unfortunate. I'd like to see Derrick Henry on a big-time team that we could see making a deep run in the playoffs, because that team would be unstoppable in the run game. So I went to bed last night, and I read a headline, and I thought my story this morning was going to be Derek Carr to the Jets. Last night, pretty late, Jeremy Fowler from ESPN reported, while the Panthers and the Saints remain in the conversation for Derek Carr, the former Pro Bowl quarterback has a slight lean towards the Jets as his next home as of now, per source. Nothing is final, but Jets, who are linked to Aaron Rodgers, have made an impression. So I went to bed last night thinking, oh, he's a New York Jet, and I thought it's a great fit. Derek Carr has never had an elite defense. He works well with young guys. We know that he's a very family-oriented person. He felt like a good fit for the New York Lights, someone who this city and all of its fans and the organization could really wrap their arms around. And then to me, that made it very obvious. Aaron Rodgers to the Raiders, Derek Carr to the Jets. But that all went out the window this morning when at around 10 a.m., we started hearing the first reports from Ian Rappaport and from Mike Garofalo, of course from NFL Network. Hey, Derek Carr is not going to New York. He is going to New Orleans. So this morning at around 10 a.m., the top free agent quarterback is off the board. Derek Carr to New Orleans, their top choice. Ian Rappaport sent out that tweet. And then he followed it up later on, a couple minutes later, by saying, the Saints are giving their new quarterback, Derek Carr, a 4-year deal. With a big quarterback number coming, they'll make it work with their cap situation. So I couldn't help but wonder, how big is this going to be? So I assumed no less than $35 million a year for Derek Carr. I just didn't know how that was going to be possible for the Saints. The Saints are in what we like to call cap hell. There is no way out of that situation. It has been very tough. They've had no flexibility for a couple years now. That's why Sean Payton left. That's why Drew Brees retired. The Saints had the benefit of pushing back contracts for as long as possible under the Sean Payton, Drew Brees final days. But at some point, that's going to catch up with you. So this morning, the Saints are $55 million over the cap, even before the Derek Carr deal. So this makes this even more interesting. Now, 10 minutes ago, right as I click record on this camera, the Saints and Derek Carr agreed on a 4-year, $150 million deal with $100 million in total guarantees per me and Mike Garofalo. That's what Ian Rappaport said. He gets $70 million effectively fully guaranteed, $60 million at signing, and then $10 million in year 3 vesting after year 1. So Ian Rappaport finishes off this tweet with, Carr structures his deal to accommodate the Saints' cap issues. I mean, that last line doesn't really make sense because, how much more were they going to give Derek Carr? If you weren't in cap hell, was Derek Carr going to get a $200 million deal? How much money were they willing to pay Derek Carr if there was no such thing as cap? Which, after hearing this news this morning, it seems like, a lot of people joke around the cap is a myth. It seems like it this morning. So I was watching First Take this morning and a couple other programs when the news hit about Derek Carr signing with the Saints, but the number wasn't quite out there yet. And honestly, I could not believe the disrespect for Derek Carr. People were laughing, saying, oh, this doesn't make a difference. It doesn't matter that he's reuniting with an old coach, an old executive. People seem to totally discount that Derek Carr is one of the top 15 to top 12 quarterbacks in this league. He had a bad year, and it is, unfortunately for him, plummeted his stock on the public fan and media arena. Of course, clearly not with actual teams, because that contract is massive, and I can't help but wonder, what were the Jets willing to offer him? Must have been similar amounts, especially since the Jets are not in cap hell. Can't help but wonder, were the Jets offering even more? So this makes sense. Unfortunately, on the Aaron Rodgers front, this just means all options are still on the table. He could go back to the Packers. He could theoretically retire. He could go to the Raiders, and he could go to the Jets. All these landing spots are still available, so we will have to wait yet another week, it seems, to get some clarity on that front. But on the Derek Carr situation, I could not believe the disrespect towards Derek Carr from some of the biggest media pundits and analysts in the game. Derek Carr has played with awful defenses his entire career, and especially as of lately, in a loaded division. He went from a division with Derek Carr himself, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, and Russell Wilson, who some believe is washed, but is still one of the most talented quarterbacks in the NFL, and I think he'll prove that this upcoming season with Sean Payton. He's going from that loaded AFC West division to an NFC South division where there's really no guaranteed day one starting quarterback for any other team in the division, and in a division, the NFC South, where a losing record won the division last year, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They could go 8-9 and win that division. That division is not going to get way better overnight. Derek Carr is the best quarterback in that division now, and it shows. And now it's not as complex as it used to be, where, oh, you have a great defense, you could win your division. You have a strong run game or a ground and pound style of offense, you could win your division. No, it's very clear. Almost every single division this past year was won by the best quarterback. It's no longer a mystery. It's very easy to pick who's going to make it out of the regular season and into the playoffs, because the league is so offense-driven and it's so quarterback-centric. So this means that the Saints are clearly willing to go all in with Derek Carr. And for those of you who think Derek Carr is incapable of winning, tell me how it's possible for Derek Carr to win when his defenses have been this bad. The Raiders' defensive rankings every season since Derek Carr has been their starting quarterback, they've never been better than the 20th best defense in the league. 2014, number 32 out of 32. 2015, 22. 2016, 20th. 2017, 20th. Then back to 32 in 2018. 2019, 24th. This last 3-year stretch has been awful for Raiders defenses. 2020, the 30th defense in the league. 2021, the 26th best defense in the league. And last year, the 28th. Tell me how you expect Derek Carr to go out there, put up points, and win games when his defense has never been better than 20th in his career. And he's played with like an insane stat that I can't even remember because it's so astronomically strange. He's played with like 8 head coaches in 9 years. How was he supposed to succeed with that? I know I talk about all the time. Great quarterbacks are overcomers. They rise above their circumstances. Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence, all these guys that are coming into the league now. Derek Carr, I like him, but he's not a showstopper. He's not an overcomer. You got to give him a little bit of leeway here. He needs to have a formidable defense and a formidable offense. So a lot of people saying he's not going to be any better with Chris Olave and with Alvin Kamara because he just got out of a team where he was playing with Devontae Adams, Darren Waller, and Josh Jacobs, and Hunter Renfrow. It's not going to get much better than that. Maybe not. Maybe the offense won't be as potentially electric as we thought it would be this past year. But Derek Carr with Chris Olave, with a guy like Alvin Kamara in the backfield, knowing, hey, I've got a much better defense now. Because, by the way, last year, the Saints defense ranked 5th overall. So he's going to a much better defense that he can trust in, and he knows I don't have to swing for the fences on every single drive. I don't have to score a touchdown on every single drive to potentially win this game. Derek Carr is going to be able to do what he does best. He's going to play with a lot less pressure. He's still going to have some great talent on offense, and he's playing for a great organization. Mickey Loomis, the GM for the Saints, who helped turn around the Saints from the Aints to the Saints, a respectable organization under Sean Payton. I still think they've got some good pieces there. I don't love that they're ran by a defensive-minded head coach, but you know what? Maybe what Derek Carr needs right now is not an offensive-minded juggernaut, someone who can scheme guys open crazily like a Kyle Shanahan or Andy Reid. Maybe he just needs consistency. He went from Gruden to interim head coaches to Josh McDaniels, who we are, at least in my opinion, still not sure how good Josh McDaniels is, if we're being honest. Was carried by Tom Brady for years, it seems. We still have not seen the best of Josh McDaniels as a play caller or as an offensive-minded head coach. Maybe Derek Carr just wants to say, hey, I've got a coach that I know, regardless of scandals or firings, is most likely going to be here all year and will be here for at least this season. That ability to take a deep breath and understand, hey, certain things are taken care of, that's invaluable to a veteran quarterback like Derek Carr, who, in order to succeed, just needs a little bit of understanding, a little bit of consistency, and a little bit of leeway. Hey, I know I've got a young wide receiver one in Chris Olave. I know I've got Alvin Kamara. I know I have a great GM. I know that we are tight when it comes to cap restraint, and we're not going to have flexibility in the offseason or at the trade deadline. But I also know I've got a great defense that was top 5 last year. This makes the most sense out of pretty much any team for Derek Carr. I did not see him going to the Panthers. I didn't like that fit at all. That's why I never talked about it on the show, even though it seemed to be like the number one rumor for the past 2 months. It didn't make sense. If he was going to go to an easily winnable division, I thought the Saints were a better fit, and I'm glad it seems that they've all figured it out. They're going to pull through. Mark my words, as of today, Derek Carr and the Saints are going to win the NFC South. I don't know if it's going to be pretty. I don't think it's going to be a winning record necessarily, because they could win the division with a losing record as we saw this year. But make no mistake, they will win the division and they will make the playoffs and win at least one playoff game, I would assume. Or at least, they will at least make it to one playoff game. I'll need to watch a little bit more to see if they'll win it, but we'll see. This next story is one that really bothers me, that bothered me all weekend, that has been, irking me for the past couple months because of the situations that we've seen playing out with this individual, and it has reached an all-time high of potential risking of an NBA career. Of course, I'm talking about Jon Morant, and I was looking at some of the headlines this weekend that we have had to deal with over the past couple months surrounding Jon Morant. This one posted on the 5th of February. Jon Morant's inner circle allegedly aimed a red laser at Indiana Pacers during aggressive confrontations after the game. Jon Morant accused of making threatening statement to a Memphis Mall guard. Jon Morant appears to flash a gun on his Instagram live video while posing topless in a strip club just days after a police report revealed that the $12 million a year NBA star flashed a weapon at a 17-year-old and punched him 12 to 13 times. Jon Morant allegedly punched teen dozens of times, flashed gun, police say. Now, of course, all of this is alleged. All of these are reports, things that are going through courts. The NBA is investigating Jon Morant, and as of right now, they have suspended him for 2 games, one of which will be played tomorrow night against the Lakers at 10 p.m., a rivalry game, at least from what we've seen this season. And this really, really hurts to watch. I've seen a lot of people make comparisons to Allen Iverson. Some similar situations. Apparently was running with the same kind of people outside of the locker room, outside of working hours, you could say. And this is just really disappointing. Just last summer, we were talking about Jon Morant being one of the most spectacular and potentially exciting stars in the NBA. And you can tell when a league is building up a star, when they are marketing someone as the star of tomorrow. Jon Morant has been marketed as must-watch TV by the NBA, is a top 10 watch in the NBA right now. And last summer, he agreed to a $200 million contract with the Memphis Grizzlies, the maximum rookie extension. It could exceed $231 million. And with all of that said, all of his accomplishments, as great as he is on the floor, why would he put himself in these situations? Now, I'm not here to speculate. From what's being reported, people are saying it doesn't matter where Jon Morant grew up or what he came from. These kinds of decisions are unacceptable. And from what I understand and what seems to be the consensus and the memes out there on Jon Morant, apparently he didn't grow up like that. Apparently his parents made sure that they were raising him the right way, and they kept him away from that uglier side of what it means to grow up in a neighborhood that is not necessarily as forgiving, that doesn't allow you to have as many opportunities, where so many NBA and NFL and professional athletes come from. Because the reason you see so many athletes come from those communities is because they have a little bit more grit than everyone else. They've had to overcome so much more than everyone else. They have so much more of a hunger and desire to succeed than everyone else. And Jon Morant's parents, from what we can conclude from what seems to be reported, did a great job of putting him in a situation to succeed and keeping him away from the uglier side of what some of those neighborhoods and circumstances have to offer. So the question that everyone, including myself, is asking this morning is, why is Jon Morant putting himself in these situations? Why does he roll with these kinds of guys and roll with this kind of crew? Why is he pointing lasers, at least allegedly? Apparently that wasn't a firearm, that wasn't confirmed, but pointing red lasers at other NBA players' cars after a game, allegedly? That is so below an NBA athlete. And, Kendrick Perkins said had the best discussion about this morning on First Take. He said, one of the things that he realized once he left the league was that phone stops ringing. In his own words, he said, that phone stops ringing when you're no longer in the league, when you're no longer the hottest guy on the block, when you don't have all the cameras and all the notoriety, and your hooping days are over. That phone stops ringing. People stop being interested. All of a sudden, the people that you thought were friends for years and confidants suddenly disappear. And it's a sad reality that a lot of NBA players are being more and more open about nowadays, and they are trying to inform and educate these younger players. Look, in a day and age where, we're not talking about $40 million in career earnings, as great as that would be for an NBA athlete. We're not talking about those old school, those old contracts in the NBA. Generational wealth, $250 million wealth is available to top 10, top 15, sometimes even top 25 stars. The money is so readily available. Charles Barkley was ranting about this last week on First Take. He told Stephen A., we're paying bums. Now, I don't necessarily think that's true, but they're paying players who back then would have never gotten this kind of money, but by being an average or better than most player in the NBA today, especially if you're a superstar, you can make massive amounts of money and set not only yourself up, but set up your entire family for generations to come with generational wealth. And for Jon Morant to, with such frivolous, such temporary happiness or kicks, to be doing all these things and potentially put that at risk is very, very disturbing and angering to watch. Now, I saw Jon Morant's statement over the weekend, and it seems that he's talking about making a plea for help, that he's going to get the right help, and people are tiptoeing around this situation online and even on some of the bigger cable shows out there. And there's speculation out there, he says he needs to get help. Now, whether that's a mental health thing or whether that's substances, we can only assume what that may be. But apparently the NBA offices have been investigating this hardcore for several months. And apparently even Stephen A. said they're not reopening. And Wendy said this to Stephen A. on First Take. Apparently they're not even reopening an investigation into Jon Morant or starting a new one because their previous investigations, unfortunately, haven't even closed because there's been so many incidents surrounding Jon Morant. My opinion, my takeaway, a lot easier for me to say sitting in this chair, not being a professional athlete, not understanding the circumstances, but Jon Morant really needs to separate himself from that crew, from that group of people, because they are quite simply weighing him down. After everything that his parents and his family have done to make sure that he can succeed and he can make it and that he is good enough with his talent and works hard enough with the work ethic that's been implemented by the people around him, to think that could just disappear overnight because Jon Morant is, if he continues down this path, he is risking being kicked out of the NBA. That is a very sobering thought, and that is a very scary thought. And I hope that this is the right amount of incidents or pressure or potential punishment impending, that Jon Morant can get his act together, can separate himself from those that he is rolling around with, and he can just focus on playing basketball. Not that our athletes only need to focus on playing the game, but you can be a social justice warrior. You can have businesses outside the NBA. You can have podcasts, and you can have fun, and you can have a social life. But this is crossing a boundary to very ugly and very dangerous. And that's something that a lot of people aren't even talking about. The dangers and the situations that Jon Morant is putting himself in. Forget the money, forget the NBA, his livelihood, his life. That is a very sobering thought, and I hope Jon Morant can move on from this because it's unacceptable. And his parents raised him better than that. And Jon Morant seems like a very exciting, very happy-go-lucky guy. I think he knows better than that. So there have been some big football headlines this Monday morning across the NFL, but the real headlines came over the weekend. Of course, everyone was talking about the Combine. I assume the ratings report is going to come back excellent. It seems like the Combine is back. People are very interested, and it has to do with a certain individual who has wowed everyone. The Gators quarterback, Anthony Richardson, number 15. Wow. He put on an absolute clinic, and he separated himself athletically and physically from every single other quarterback and maybe even player in that Combine. So what a day for Anthony Richardson at the Combine. His 40-yard dash, he ran a 4.43. Unbelievable. I believe he's one of only a few quarterbacks to run under a 4.5 since 2003. He was the number one guy this year. I believe he set the record since 2003, and I believe he was number one in that category, the 40-yard dash, for all of his co-competitors in the Combine. The broad jump, 10.9, the best ever by a quarterback. His vertical jump, 40.5 inches, the best ever by a quarterback. I mean, Anthony Richardson was an absolute showstopper over the weekend, and he made some throws in the throwing drill. My God, for a quarterback who's been criticized for his accuracy, he performed so well in that drill, and the betting odds are reflective of it this morning. It opened up at plus 10,000 odds for Anthony Richardson to be the number one overall pick in this year's NFL draft. Today, it's plus 300. If that is not an indicator of how the world views Anthony Richardson differently after this weekend, and how NFL GMs and coaches and executives and teams as a whole are viewing him, I would not be shocked if Anthony Richardson is the number one overall pick in this NFL draft because he has separated himself from the pack this weekend at the Combine. First in every potential quarterback category, in the broad jump, in the vertical jump, in the 40-yard dash. He was unstoppable. And for a guy who possesses all the intangibles, I mean, he's huge. He's very tall. He's 6'4". I think he's 244 pounds. He's above 230 for sure. But for such a big quarterback, for such an athletic quarterback, today's NFL, there could not be a better era for Anthony Richardson to succeed in besides this one. I mean, he is doing so well at the Combine, and you can't help but wonder, what is his limit? The sky really is the limit for Anthony Richardson because athletically, physically, he has no limits. He is one of the strongest, fastest, most athletic quarterbacks I have ever seen, was certainly the most athletic and largest in this year's draft and at this year's Combine. I just pray that he goes to a team that has a competent coaching staff or a good quarterback coach or a good GM or a good franchise who can build around him because with the right coaching, Anthony Richardson could be a top 10 quarterback talent easily in the league. And, I was really thinking about this last night, people talk so much about top 5 and top 10, and it's something that I try to stay away from most of the time, but it's what gets clicks. It's what people love. They want to know, hey, where does this pundit or this person think Anthony Richardson or any quarterback for that matter ranks amongst the best? And I think Anthony Richardson, upon entering the league, the day he is drafted, he will already be the most physical and the most athletic quarterback in the NFL. He will surpass Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. He is the 1A. He's number one. And that is incredibly exciting to watch. He could be one of the best quarterbacks in this league. It is going to come down to where he falls in the draft and what coaching staff he is surrounded with because, the sky really is the limit for him. And I can't believe what we saw over the weekend. Anthony Richardson just looks different from everyone else. And I don't want to overreact to this because we know how bad his accuracy was in college. We know the touchdown to interception ratio. We didn't love that, or at least I certainly don't love that. But the athletic intangibles, the individual bits of talent, and what he is capable of doing with his size, with his speed, with his athleticism, I can't help but wonder what is in store for Anthony Richardson, because he is one of the best quarterback talents we have ever seen. And that is not an overreaction on this Monday morning. Even with the incredible basketball games and the NFL Combine going on this weekend, my heart and my eyes were locked into the main event of the weekend. Jon Jones, UFC 285. Jon taking on Cyril Gane for the heavyweight championship of the world, now that Francis is no longer in the UFC and the title was vacant. I was so excited to watch what that could be. So I'll be honest here. I have not been a UFC fan for 10 plus years. I became a big time fan, like a lot of others, during the pandemic, because they were one of the only sports. Actually, they were the only sport. They were the first sport to really come back. And that's how they gained so many new fans and so much viewership. And in the past 3 years, I've had the incredible privilege of getting close to some of those higher ups in the MMA community. One of those being Ariel Helwani, who is the guy for MMA news and for breaking news and for reports and rumors and interviews in mixed martial arts. And of course, he has a show, the MMA Hour, which is airing today. It also airs on Thursday, and he is interviewing Stipe Miocic. And I can't wait to see what Stipe has to say, because he is going to be the opponent for Jon Bones Jones, the heavyweight champ of the world. And I'll be honest, I had seen the documentaries and the replays and the old fights of Jon Jones, and I knew he was vicious. I knew his style of fighting was going to be, if he wins, he is going to maul and absolutely terrify Cyril Gane. And to Gane's credit, all week, he did not seem intimidated. But, one of the most scary and sobering things was Jon Jones this weekend reminded me of prime Conor McGregor, in the sense that Jon would say things at the press conference with total confidence, with total cool, and he kept his composure, and all of those things came true. Jon, the entire week, throughout the press conferences and the mini interviews with journalists throughout the week, was saying, I am going to be a lot stronger and a lot more physical and a lot bigger than Gane thinks. And I've had other heavyweights tell me that as I've sparred over the years and practiced with them. And exactly what Jon said came to fruition. Jon made it look easy, and it makes an MMA fan wonder, what would a fantasy matchup look like between Francis and Jon Jones? And it might be the recency bias talking, but after watching what Jon did to Gane, and after watching the back and forth between Francis and Gane during their last matchup, I don't think it's close. I think Jon Jones would beat anyone in the heavyweight division, because his style is just so unprotectable. Again, that's not a word, but it's unguardable. I don't know what to say here in the MMA community. What is the proper terminology? But the point being, Jon Jones will not be stopped. He has elite striking. He was the guy that implemented the elbows and made them mainstream before Conor started using them, and the shoulders. He has been one of the most complex strikers in the UFC for years. And, Jon Jones doesn't look like he's slowing down at all. He has had moments in his career where, because of unfavorable issues, he has had to take breaks, and he has had breaks of 1 year suspension, then another 1 year suspension, then the steroid suspension, then the time away from the game because of the contract disputes, over 3 years off, and he doesn't look like he has slowed down. He is a 15-time UFC champion, of course, 14-time light heavyweight, 1-time heavyweight, and let me just say, I wish Stipe Miocic all the best, because as much as I like Stipe, and he was one of the first fights that I watched when I started coming into the MMA fan base and the community, because he was fighting against Francis in 2020. As great as I know Stipe is, and as much as fans love him, Stipe has no business being in an octagon with Jon Jones, because Jon Jones is going to not look past, he is going to look through his opponents. And if he did that to Cyril Gane, who was so good at fending away Francis Ngannou's attacks, which is what surprises so many fans. Jon made it look too easy. I wasn't shocked. The pay-per-view had just started. I thought I was going to strap in, based on Jon's previous fights, for a full 25-minute bout where Jon was going to maul him, but it was going to take its time. It was going to be a decision win. He was going to, throw some leg kicks, throw some elbows, really punish him. He didn't even have to. He got on Gane's back, brought him down to the ground, and used his elite grappling to say, this is going to be over in less than 2 minutes. And wow, I don't think there's anybody on the planet who could possibly beat Jon Jones. And I think it's pretty obvious now. Jon Jones, the rankings have not come out yet at the time of filming this. Jon Jones will be the pound-for-pound #1 fighter in the world in the UFC rankings. And if not, he definitely should be. And I think even watching Dana White's post-fight press conference, who, it's not that he's reluctant to compliment his fighters, but he just likes to build matchups. He's very complimentary to both sides. He's very equal and even in what he says. But even Dana White, I'm talking about, he was like, Jon's the greatest of all time, and that is undisputable. And he didn't even try to make an argument for any other heavyweight or any other fighter on earth to potentially not even beat, but stand in the octagon across from Jon Jones. That was an incredible showcase. I hope we have more than just one fight left from Jon. It seems like he's going to fight Stipe for sure. Beyond that, we're not sure. Could he retire? He hasn't exactly given us a concrete answer, but that fight made us want to see more Jon Jones, and it shows you he truly is the greatest of all time. No one will ever come close to his legacy because 15 championships is just insane. And if I had to guess, he is going to be a 16-time champion, at least when he beats Stipe Miocic. It's an exciting matchup. Hopefully it's International Fight Week this summer. That seems to be the consensus of the soonest this could possibly happen because Jon didn't take any damage. These are things that are shocking, that don't happen in MMA. Even me as a young fan, I know you're going to take some sort of damage when you go into the octagon. Jon didn't take any. Not a punch, not a hit. He did have that one kick to the groin that was it was a dirty moment, and Jon Jones apparently believed that Cyril Gane is a dirty fighter because he talked about how he knew that, he liked to pull off moves like that in the post-fight press conference, and how he wanted to make sure the referee acknowledged, hey, that was a dirty move by Cyril Gane, but he was prepared for anything and everything. He was not too cool or too old or too washed for the moment. Jon Jones has returned, and he is the #1 pound-for-pound fighter on the planet. With that said, that is the end of this week's episode of the Benjamin Cure Show. An exciting offseason, so many interesting stories, so many developing stories, and I assume we will have much, much more next week on the Aaron Rodgers front, on potentially the Derrick Henry front, and so many other free agents in the NFL that we love, so many great games in the NBA and beyond. Until next time, I'm Benjamin Cure. This is the best place for the best takes, and this is, of course, the Benjamin Cure Show. I'll see you next week.